Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir El Azouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we will talk about cybersecurity. So we had some more information regarding MDR for cybersecurity. We had some guidance that were out. And I decided to have this podcast just to help people that are trying to understand what they have to do for cybersecurity. And I have with me Erik Vollebregt, who will help us to really understand all that. So Erik, welcome to the Medical Device.
Sorry, I should do this in Corona times.
Yeah, let's make it more science fiction. So Erik, so as we are talking about these topics since few months now, there was this MDCG guidance that was out. There were also a lot of discussion before that about cybersecurity. So should we consider cybersecurity as a science fiction or something where, you know, when we are looking at those movies when they are killing people because they are hacking their pacemakers or they are hacking their devices? So is it something real now or is it still science fiction?
Well, I think it's very real actually, because actually, it was in 2014. I think I was at a meeting in Denmark where they actually had gotten an ethical hacker that also worked for the U.S. Army, and he was doing quite some nice demonstrations on stage there on how to find connected medical devices online and how to hack them in 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
And it was pretty amazing what that guy could do. He could actually show us images that were stored on MRI machines in Thailand and things like that. So it was quite amazing.
Quite scary also.
Well, yeah. But that's the problem with risks, that they are hypothetical until they actually materialize. And if you really want to see something very, very interesting, of course, maybe not everybody is a nerd like me, but I'm a big fan of CSI Cyber.
Yeah.
And season 2, episode 5, it's called Hack ER. And that is an episode in which a hacker releases ransomware in a hospital and then threatens to kill a patient with a connected medical device every hour when the hospital doesn't pay up.
Oh, really?
And I've had discussions with actual hackers about the exploits that they show in this episode, and basically all of them are actually possible.
Okay.
So that's
dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're an RA manager listening to this and you want to convince your management at a very low level that even a CEO can understand, then definitely show them that CSI Cyber episode, and then they hopefully make some budget available for cybersecurity as well.
Yeah, because I suppose, the manufacturers are not intentionally opening, if I can say, some doors for hackers. But at the end, they don't place enough budget, if I can say, to secure their software or to have some maybe tests done regarding cybersecurity. So this is mainly the reason, and we have really to make some awareness about that.
Well, I would rather say that it depends on, sometimes there's existing software that is just very modular and doesn't stick together very well and wasn't designed with software and resilience in mind. That's one. And then what you also often see is that once a particular piece of software, let's say, has been developed, a manufacturer will never, ever commit the budget to redesign it for security.
Okay. Yeah, so better to have it good the first time instead of to have to redesign everything.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, I always keep repeating it with many things to clients, like you have to begin with the end in mind. And if you want secure software, then you have to design it securely from the start. And that is something that companies often find really difficult, because they have software design processes that, let's say, are only focused on medical device intended functionality, but they forget to bake in security from the start. I mean, my little brother has started his career in an artificially intelligent software for military purposes. And he knows a thing or two about designing for security, because that's what this kind of software needs to be. And there they really, he also did military aircraft software. And if I hear him talk about the principles they use for design for software like that, I mean, that's of course how you should do it. And even if you look at design for aircraft software, I mean, look at these idiots at Boeing, how they've been working as well. I mean, it's not a given that they even design aircraft software in the right way. Yeah.
So it's really a big topic. I think, as you mentioned, also it's not specific to medical devices. It's something that it can happen in all kind of environment. But as here we are really focused on medical devices. We are really trying to give the right information for those people that are manufacturing those devices. And the first question I have mainly regarding the regulation is the fact that we are talking now about cybersecurity a lot. But is it something that is coming here, or we are discussing about that specifically because of the MDR, or under MDD it was also the same kind of requirements that we had, and it's just a trend that we are talking about that now?
Well, I think it's a good question, because you will not see any specific safety requirements or security requirements for software in the MDD, of course. Right, because the MDD dates back to 1993, when they didn't even have the concept of devices running software or devices being software. But the MDD has always been, I think, an extreme Swiss Army knife of legislation.
Yeah.
And of course, under the MDD, we had our fantastic essential requirement 12A about software lifecycle. And of course, we had the basic requirement of risk management and design requirements for that under the Medical Devices Directive. So all the, let's say, substantive requirements for software in terms of cybersecurity, they were already there, you could say, except that they were not written down in such an explicit and prescriptive way as they are now in the MDR. I think that's actually true for a lot of things, that these were, let's say, substantive requirements that already applied under the MDD, but have just been written down in a more prescriptive way in the MDR.
But as you mentioned, so they are written down now in the MDR. We have also some guidance coming regarding cybersecurity from MDCG. Does it mean that the notified bodies will have more focus about that? There will be some expert within the notified body group that will have the task, if I can say, to review this cybersecurity topic?
Well, they better, because now cybersecurity is also an explicit, more explicit requirement. So under the MDD, it was, well, first of all, a lot of software escaped notified bodies altogether, right? Because it was all Rule 12. And that is not the case under the MDR anymore. But also you could say that the requirements were there. So notified bodies that did do software or looked at devices that were running software, they would also always need to review risks related to device running software. So let's say, for example, I have a radiation device, a particle beam for treatment of cancer.
Yeah.
And that device runs software, of course, because the Iron Man, in which you can actually manually adjust the mirrors for your particle beams and then make something work. So you need software for that. And if you have software running on a device that controls a particle beam with which you can burn holes in people, basically, then you want really good risk management on the software as well. And these would be really basic stuff, like for example, if the device has a graphic user interface with the outside world, then do I need access controls on the user interface? Or if my particle accelerator is connected via the internet, so I as a manufacturer can do easy firmware updates, is that a really good idea to do it?
So in terms of as I've said, notified bodies, we need to have some experts. And I think also manufacturers have now to or hire some consultants that are really fine, if I can say, that are really skilled with cybersecurity, or hire directly the team within their group. So do you think that we'll move more and more within this kind of area, because we have the equipment that contains the software, and now we have also all those applications that are running on our smartphone, which also need those kind of things. So this will be really a big job, if I can say, a big role within the medical device companies.
Yeah, I think so, because because there's more and more software and software running devices. So and also, in fact, there are more. So let's say, so you could say the threat envelope has increased, right? Because there are more types of devices that are software themselves or use software. They are deployed on a much wider scale, and you actually see that there are risks for that, because in the Netherlands we've had we've had hospitals that had to close down the whole hospital, for example, because they were affected by ransomware. Okay. So it's not like these risks are hypothetical. And then I think there's one other influence that also impacts on this, is that basically every device that is software or runs software is processing personal data concerning health of patients one way or the other. Yeah. Which means that for Europe, it's covered by the General Data Protection Regulation. And the General Data Protection Regulation has quite strict rules on security principles. Actually, even the GDPR explicitly requires safety by design, security by design. So that's an interesting concept that that impacts on how devices should be designed as well. So it's an overlap, I think, between what you have with the GDPR and what we have as the requirements for the MDR. So there is really this overlap between those requirements, and we are going all those things are going in the same direction to have products that are safe and also to protect data of the patients. Yeah, because because under both of these regulations refer to cybersecurity design principles, and the good part about science is that it's science. So that means that these principles are basically the same under both of these regulations. So in both regulations use the so-called CIA triad. So the triad of the principles of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which are leading principles under both of these regulations. Which actually means that as a manufacturer, when you are designing a software running device, or you are designing software as a medical device, it's really a smart idea to do both your data protection impact assessment under the GDPR and your risk management plan under the MDR at the same time, and actually have these processes interlock, if you will. Yeah, I think the risk are, if I can say, you can have both elements inside your risk assessment and define what are the risks and try to reduce them. In terms of medical device manufacturers, so now they hear that they really need to do that and to move forward. So what would you advise them to start with? What is the first step for them to do, and what exactly which guidance or also they can follow to be on the safe side? Well, I would always advise them to begin with the end in mind, right? Yeah. I mean, my father was a software designer. My little brother is a software designer. He makes software for really risky stuff. So I was taught, I've learned to program in BASIC and in other languages. And I'm from the old school of programming.
Okay.
So I would always sit down, define what my software is going to do, and then think a bit about risks. How am I going to do this? And then I would write it up. And I would have some iterations in, okay, am I where I need to be? But what I see a lot especially with startups, is that companies tend to start out with very, very basic design goals,
okay,
or design specifications, because it's agile and it's Scrum, and you have like 5 Lean, 6 Sigma, Black, Blue belts, Jiu-Jitsu ninjas on the project that will sprint all over the place,
okay,
which sounds like a very nice exercise in bullshit bingo. So I'm having a bit of fun with these terms. But typically what I see is that if you design software that way, you need to really, really make sure that your team stays on point and designs for the task that the software is for. And what you see, and that is, I think, a more general problem with, well, of course, startups that are strapped for cash, but also manufacturers that have projects that are strapped for resources, is that the first thing that suffers when there is a constraint on resources, it is how well the software is built.
Okay.
Because software development teams are not, in the end, let's say, they are not evaluated on how good and secure was the software that you deliver. No, they are, in the end, they are evaluated on, were you able to deliver a working prototype that we could ship for the deadline?
Okay.
And that's where the problems start, I think.
Yeah, so this is mainly for the design phase when we are designing the product. Do you have some advice for the regulators or the regulatory affairs managers or quality assurance people that have to, if I can say, look at what those people were doing? Is there some advice for them?
Yeah. Take your CEO to the parking lot, slam their fingers in a car door, and talk about dead bodies that will pile up when the software doesn't work in the way it should. Maybe show them season 2, episode 5 of CSI Cyber to help them understand that this is actually about something. Because people tend to think like, yeah, software can't be dangerous, right? I mean, how is software going to harm somebody? Well, I mean, you can harm people very severely with software. That's actually what the whole idea of integrity and availability in the cybersecurity triad is about. That you actually know that the software is not compromised and will do what you want it to do. So, and it always looks bad if you have to fix things afterwards.
So let's say that a training really made by a professional in cybersecurity would be really a great asset for them, so that they can really understand what are the requirements and what are the risks and what they should do exactly to be on the safe side for their development and for also the regulatory part of the business. So we have also, as I've said, some guidance that were issued by MDCG or some other parties. So those guidance, do you think they will help our manufacturers to be on the safe side?
Well, if the manufacturers actually read them and apply it, for sure. But that's of course always the thing, because I think the problem with the cybersecurity requirements are, like with risk management in general, is that the result is as good as the people that apply the rules.
Okay.
Right? Because with risk management, I mean, the risk management standard is fantastic, but you can still do really bad risk management by using the methodology.
Yeah, clear.
I think the same applies to cybersecurity. There's a lot of good cybersecurity material out there, and I think the new guidance is good, although it is kind of a rush job, I would say. I mean, the MDCG managed to even make a spelling mistake in the title, which I think is kind of...
Guidance. I think it was guidance. And as soon as we mentioned that on LinkedIn, I think they corrected that quickly, but it was it was funny.
Oh, it's still not corrected. You can
really?
still download... Yeah,
I saw a copy that was corrected, so it's why I was thinking they corrected
really?
that.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I think I downloaded a non-corrected copy recently. And also, I mean, there's mistakes in the numbering and so on. So, I mean, really, MDCG people, if you want something to not look as a rush job, then give some thought. These are things, if my paralegal does something like this, I will just be very angry with them. This is official stuff. But anyway,
some good document practices should be executed here. We have maybe to audit their procedure for that, because just to get that they have the right things coming out.
Get a secretary or something. And I know it's difficult in the government because nobody has money for that, but I would pay for a secretary for them if we would get better documentation.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the guidance, it is still, I would say, what I would say is really helpful about this guidance is that it does a good job in clarifying some of what I think are core issues in the MDR. I've been teaching MDR these days with the principles saying CE means connected everything. Okay. Everything has to do with everything under the MDR. More data required, very relevant for risk management as well. Okay. Did you look at everything relevant, right? So I would say for the risk management, you could say it's more data relevant. And then, of course, there's also the nice acronym that I've also been teaching by. CE also means consistency everywhere, and that's also important. So if you have a data protection policy that treats cyber risks differently than your risk management for the medical device, then you are doing something wrong as a manufacturer, because then your risk management is flawed, because you're apparently not looking at the right risks. Either you're not looking at the right risks in your MDR silo, or you are not looking at the right risks in your GDPR silo. And I think that really means that these silos should be overlapping, or at least be in very close contact with each other.
Yeah, no, I think
to answer your question, I think what this guidance does a really good job at is showing how to do good risk management for software. How basically risk management for cybersecurity risks sits in the MDR, and how processes relate to each other. And they have a couple of nice, really nice, I think, graphics in the MDR. So people that watch this podcast, please download the document. The document has these nice pictures like this in it, nice flow charts that show how different processes relate to each other. It is nice tables in it that give you ideas on how certain things correspond to each other. There is a nice another nice table how it relates to other European legislation, like for example the GDPR. So I think I think Document has done a good job at putting a lot of information together and also putting it into context. And I think the what I like very much is how they do that, and also how they show that cybersecurity is a bigger picture.
Yeah.
So a bigger picture of data protection as well, for example, and that's nice. They give a good overview of application of basic principles of cybersecurity. How also, and that's important as well, how that is also relevant for the supply chain of devices and also the users. Because you may remember that in the MDR there is now a special GSPR for the IT environment in which you are going to deploy software, and they talk a lot about that. I don't think that there's some mentioning about contracts and how things work. Well, there you can see that people that wrote the document are not lawyers. I don't completely agree with everything they wrote in there, and I think it's also not always realistic contracting practices the way they describe it, but I'll write a bit more about that in the blog that I'm writing about the guidance. But overall, I think this is a very useful contribution to, let's say, the regulatory state of art. And also, I think it's going to fit well into, or at least I hope, in the IMDRF work item on cybersecurity that they're working on it, because there's a larger IMDRF work item where they are working on basically the global guide on cybersecurity for medical devices, practice and principles it's called. And that guide, I expect, will look a lot like this guidance.
Okay, and so anyway, I will put all those guidances on the show notes. And as Erik said, also he's writing now a blog, so I will put that on the show notes as soon as it's out. I think you will be releasing that before this episode is on air, so we can then read of it directly. Just one thing. So we are talking about risk management. We are talking about design. So it means that it's something that is before to release that on the market. Is there something about PMS, post-marketing surveillance, for those software that we have also to look at related to cybersecurity?
Excellent point, because I forgot that in my enthusiastic rant about all the good things in the MDCG guidance. That's one of the other good things I think that they really underline in the MDCG guidance. And that is that when the software ships, that doesn't mean that your risk management is finished.
Okay.
And that, I think, is if we look back at the good old MDD, right, where we also had to do post-market surveillance, but post-market surveillance was a lot less precisely described as under the MDR. The MDR is really specific about post-market surveillance. I think that's one of the areas where things developed insanely. Because under the MDR, we now have Article 84, right? And of course, IVDR people, please imagine the corresponding IVDR article, because I can't always mention double. But the IVDR has the same corresponding article, because software can also be an IVD, right? And so both under the MDR and the IVDR, there is the requirement of having a PMS plan. And a PMS plan, that is no small matter, because there's a whole annex that deals with PMS plans, and it's quite specific in what you have to include in a PMS plan, and that is, for example, doing a life cycle relevant follow-up on changes in risk profile of your device. And to give you a really simple, I'm completely amazed about the nice halo I have above my head. Sorry. So if you look at PMS, for example, and you put that in a really simple hacking context, let's say, for example, your software is out there and it turns out that your software, that there is a particular ransomware in the market.
Yeah.
Then a medical device manufacturer, you have to have a process to make sure that on the double, you start to check, is my software susceptible to this ransomware, for example. And let's say, for example, I've seen a really cool exploit with a prosthetic limb, there was a prosthetic limb that you could that you could program from your telephone, from your smartphone, with an app through Bluetooth. But then it turned out that this prosthetic limb was vulnerable to a man-in-the-middle attack. So that means that somebody else could pretend to be the app with the Bluetooth, and they could just take over your prosthetic limb.
Okay.
Which is not very nice.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say as a manufacturer, you have designed your device to be secure for a particular version of the Bluetooth standard. Bluetooth standard is evolving all the time. New security features are added. So that means that in the post-market surveillance phase, when the Bluetooth standard evolves, that also means that you need to check whether you can actually make your devices safer by for example, upgrading to a new Bluetooth protocol, or check by what time you should maybe ask your users to upgrade the device physically before it's not safe to use anymore. Because you don't want pranksters like me to do man-in-the-middle attacks on people's prosthetic limbs just for the heck of it, because that wouldn't be a good idea.
So it means that for your post-marketing plan, you have also to include this requirement to check all those changes, all those elements that can breach the security, and that you have then to investigate, to monitor, and to correct definitely, so that your product is more safe and more secure. So it's why, as you mentioned, the life cycle of the software is also something to consider, and not just release that on the market and say, now it's fine, we are okay. I think I remember on one of the episodes we had on software, maybe we talked about the fact that, no, it was on class 1, we talked about the fact that when we are doing we have a software on the market, it's not imaginable that there is no updates that are happening, because there is always some security patch or security updates that are going every time. So it's a difficult field for manufacturers, because they are changing their software quite constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but even that, changing the software could also, doing a security update could also be a reason to change your software, not only to add new functionality.
Yeah.
And especially in cybersecurity, the state of art moves very, very quickly, because it's a continuous evolution between security measures and people trying to exploit these security measures and avoid them. So that is a process you have to follow as part of your post-market surveillance.
No, it's clear, completely clear. One last point that I wanted to cover here on this episode is about the fact that we are focusing now on the EU. Is it the same, for example, in US or in other countries? So do we have the same kind of requirements for our software? So if I design a software that is meeting the EU MDR, would this meet also the requirements for other countries?
Well, with the US, I'm pretty confident that if you do it according to the best risk management that you can do with this new guidance in mind, that you would be really close to meeting the requirements over there as well. Because like I said, it's science. It's exact science, actually. So that means that if you manage risks well here, then you will probably have also managed them well for there. And I think it helps a lot that the IVDR is working on things. And then if you look at the kind of documents that are coming out of the IVDR, it is all pretty harmonized stuff. Of course, for the US, you'll have to write up your documentation in a bit different way, right? But in the end, whether your software runs here or there, basically the same. Just as with devices, I mean, you're not going to design specific devices for here and for the US. So that means that in the end, it should be more of the same, but maybe with the documentation written up a bit differently.
Yeah, no, clear. So you can design it, if I can say, safely, and then your regulatory affairs people have to write the right documents for each country so that they are meeting the requirements of each country. But say, we should not change the software just because it's going to one country or the other. So
the risks will be the same, basically, because the user, the end user environment will be the same, the lay user environment will be the same. So I mean, that's would be different maybe if you would be designing devices for, let's say, the Australian outback or something, where devices have to be extremely ruggedized also as regards to software, because you can only hope for a weak 3G signal like 2 days a year or something.
Yeah, clear. Okay, so thank you, Erik. I think we covered really what we had to say today. I will put on the show notes all the guidance that we have talked about today, or maybe more on the show notes. So don't hesitate to go and to check them. This will be really important for you to place your software on the market so that it is compliant and it is putting the safety for your patient, performance, etc. So Erik, so there is also, as I've said, your blog. I will put the link there. So I think there is also more information there that you will provide. Mm-hmm. So will you go more deeply on this thing, or?
Yeah, I think it will be more technically, because I'll discuss some of the risk management methodologies in more detail, and I'll probably talk a bit more also about overlap between GDPR, security risk management, and medical devices risk management. And also, I'll have to write it now, because I promised that I would. Actually, I wrote it last weekend, but then due to a WordPress screw up, the whole thing I wrote was just lost. I had a tense argument with WordPress support this morning, but we still haven't found out whose fault it is. But anyway, I'll write something better now. So that's what I've resigned myself to. But yes, something is coming, I promise.
So I'm sure when the people will listen to this episode, it will be out. So then you just have to go to the show notes and you will find the link of it. Okay, yes. Erik. So thank you for your help, and I wish you a nice day.
Live long and prosperous.
Bye.